This is the Development Review Board meeting for Burlington for June 1st. And when we call each item, which we do in the order they are on the agenda, Scott will seek out and bring aboard the applicant and anybody else in the public who is intending to speak on each application as they come up. We will swear people in as appropriate, and Scott asks that when people join the meeting that they provide their addresses, their physical addresses.
Your mailing address.
Mailing address, yes. Yes, snail mail address. We're there in the real world. Okay, going through the agenda, I will say that we don't have any changes to the agenda. Is that right, Scott? All right.
That's correct.
Okay. Communications, everything has been posted online, so there are no other communications.
Correct.
I have minutes to deal with, and we have minutes posted, so if people are going to look at them, if they have any issues with them, let me know before they get approved and sent them to Ally. And with that, we can go right into the public hearing. First item is 77 Pine Street, Nedde Real Estate. And I will note, since anybody who's watching this may be not aware, this is in the form-based code district, which means our review is somewhat limited in that most of the review happens as a checklist, working with staff to make sure that they meet the criteria of section 14 of the zoning ordinance. And then there's specific reasons why we might look at aspects of these projects, and both of these projects tonight, we're looking at the height is about the only thing we're really focusing on at this point. Okay, so I see the applicant and Grace Sifo, is that right?
Yep. So we have Doug Nedde and Grace Sifo. So Doug and Grace, is there anyone else I should be enabling to speak? And before you answer, are you looking to present tonight?
We are looking to do whatever is most helpful for the DRB and for PZ and I, and we would like to also have David Saladino from VHB be able to speak, and perhaps Jeremy Farkas from MSK. Doug?
I don't think he's going to be attending, but Greg Gossens, our architect, will want to talk about his great design.
Greg first and foremost.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I see a Greg. I'm going to assume maybe that's him.
Yeah.
I think
And
so.
are there any members of the public who are asking to speak on this project?
If you'd like to speak on this, raise your hand, please, with the raise your hand function. So we're getting a few folks, Brad, who want to speak to this.
So I need to swear them in at this point, so I guess we should find out who they are.
Okay. We have Michael Green, an attorney from Lispin Leckerling, and Louis Leone. So I'll allow everyone to talk.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the 4 people I think we have from the applicant. I see we have 3 people from the public. If you will all swear to tell the truth and whole truth on the pain and penalty of perjury. I should hear a lot of yeses.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. So we will go through the applicant's presentation, and then after that, and after questions by the board, we will ask for the participation of the public. So we have a little ways to go there. And I think it would be helpful to show some of the drawings and renderings of the building as we go through this tonight.
Okay, so back to you, Grace. I can show what you've submitted unless you guys prefer to drive.
No, I would. Well, Doug can step in at any point, but I'm happy for you to drive. Thanks.
Okay.
Let's show the renderings first, Scott, if that's possible. Either the south, east, or the northeast.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I will note that the staff has recommended approval on this and that the height issue is something we look at according to section 14.64 of the ordinance. So that's one thing we want to be talking about. So wherever Doug and crew wants to start.
Yeah, you know, I know this is all focused on the height, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of the project, and then I'm going to let Greg Gosson, who designed, I think, this very beautiful building, to talk more about the building. But this is just a classic urban infill project for the city of Burlington. It's currently a drive-through that used to serve 3 drive-through bank teller spots in the city, and we're planning on relocating that access to the north of the building and creating what I think will be a great addition to the downtown area. We're going to be developing 49 apartments, so 49 homes here for a need that everyone knows is needed, more housing in downtown. So that's a really quick summary of the project. I'm very excited about it. I'm hoping to get under construction this summer on this project. That's my goal. And with that, I'm going to let Greg Gosson speak about his design, which I'm very excited about, and hopefully the city is also. So Greg, if you want to take it, that'd be great.
Okay. Is everybody picking up on me on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm joined with Steve Curdell, partner here at GBA Architects, and any questions, either Steve or I, we can field them. So the overall design, we were pretty excited when Doug asked us to do this infill project. It's a very tight site. We wanted to emphasize the kind of the small footprint and the vertical nature of it all, which was part of the criterion for a building of this height. And so you can see from this rendering that we did a brick feature with it, with some pewter colored panels, all of them in kind of a vertical oriented manner. On the street level, we created a datum along the sidewalk because Pine Street slopes about 3 feet or so from the north side to the south side. So on that datum, we put a horizontal planter. We recessed the entry, the main entry of the building, with a feature column, again, picking up on sort of the vertical nature of the building. All of the corners of the building are living, dining, kitchens. This is an apartment building. So we have corner windows in all of them. And again, we have some vertical mullion articulations on all of the window panels. The brick is a blended brick, kind of an iron spot blended brick. We varied the patterning a little bit from a running bond in many areas to kind of a staggered back and forth type bond. And you can see we ran a strip of that way up to the top of the building. That's a stair tower over there. And then we took the flanking pewter colored panels and also oriented all the windows and stacked them to create some vertical striation type accent features. The form-based code required step back, allowed us to put not only rooftop terraces out there, but also to plant some trees. And we are truly trying to plant some trees on this. We're working with Wagner Hodson Architects on the project, very talented group, to put birch trees and some star magnolias up in planters on the step back areas. We also utilized some cantilevering decks and terraces in the step back area. We wanted a building that animated the street, that really was an active participant in the street, that just didn't kind of sit and lay back. And we really want to animate and like I said, and to really improve the streetscape in kind of an active manner. So between the terraces, the rooftop plantings, and the cantilevering decks, we hope we really accomplish that well. So we can look at one other rendering if we want to flip to the rendering. There we go. So this is looking down Pine Street at the north and east elevation. You can see the feature column, the recessed entry area. In that recessed entry is a public bathroom open during business hours. as well as the main entry to the residence apartments. Again, you can see the pewter cutter panels, the stacked windows with the vertical orientation, that brick panel going all the way up for the stair tower, and all of the corner windows. That's sort of the long and the short of it. I'm happy to answer questions with it, but again, I think we really wanted to create a building that kind of emphasized the slenderness and the vertical nature of this piece of property, which I think would be a very kind of exciting and animated street presence.
Well, I would say I agree with you about the presence on the street, that it, because we do have to look at on that criteria for giving the extra height. And I think it works that way. I guess the form-based code doesn't require that the rear of the building have the same animation to it. And that was a little disappointing, but I guess that doesn't seem in contradiction to the code. And we have a west elevation there.
We do, yes. And there we use the, it's probably on another one of the attachments. There it's the pewter colored panels as he's trying to bring it up. There you go, updated building elevations.
Yeah.
Once you scroll down to the rendered ones, because I think they're best.
Yeah.
And Brad, I think, as you know, elevations are kind of hard to read because they're so cold, sterile. So the west elevation, which is the one on the left, you can see the pewter colored panels, the vertical oriented windows and stack. What you really don't read on this elevation, though, is the fact that up at the 9th level, that steps back.
Right.
And there is a trellis on the left-hand side, so that's quite a large step back, where there's a large terrace area for all the tenants in the building.
Yeah. On
the right hand, there are step backs not only on the west elevation, but it wraps around to the south elevation, which you can see on the right elevation on this one. And that's for one of the kind of the feature apartments up on top. So it still has a lot of kind of articulation to it, which we really think is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think those setbacks are really quite nice on the building there. And I guess before we go to any other part of the presentation, I'll ask if any members of the board want to ask the architect any questions on this one at this point. I don't have the visuals of the people on the board at the moment, so it's hard to tell. There we go. Nope, everybody seems to be okay with that. I'll ask one other question just because I was very curious about it, and this may be just my ignorance on the form-based code. Is the bathroom an outgrowth of a requirement for public amenity? Is that right? And Mary, if you're saying something, you're muted.
Yes, if a building is proposed to be over 85 feet, one of the standards for achieving that, there are two standards. One is providing public access, rooftop access, and or a public restroom. And in this case, that standard is being met by the provision of providing a public restroom signed from the principal entrance, maintained by the building owner, and open during regular business hours.
Okay. I did not know that, actually. So here we go.
Brad, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I see that I understand that from the report and the documents that were submitted that there isn't going to be a rooftop, I guess, access for anyone in the building. But was there any thought given to providing access to this?
There is access for people in the building to the terrace up there on the.
Well, right. So my question is, was there access? Was there any contemplation given to providing access to the public to that terrace area?
Hi, this is Doug. No, we really wanted to focus on the other choice, and that's providing the public bathroom. We just found it very problematic trying to get the general public, to a private common space with barbecues and, that different amenities. It'd be really hard to control how many people were up there. You'd almost have to have a security person there 24/7 to control how many, what the access would be. So the answer is we didn't contemplate it for very long.
Again, that's not a requirement for buildings over 85 feet. It is an option, either or.
And I guess I'll ask one of the question that maybe you'll get to it in this presentation is right now, it sounds like the inclusionary, which we don't really have much to say about that other than you have to meet the criteria. But are you planning to do that on-site or off-site? Do you know yet?
Yes, on-site, Brad. So we
Sure.
have the 15% affordable for the city, then we have another 5% for the state. So we have a 20% affordability in this project. So 10 of these apartments out of the 49 will be affordable, which is, it's quite, I don't know if the word is amazing, but it's great that we can provide, affordable housing in a building that's so nice.
I agree with that. I think it's very nice to do it on site, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. So that's great. And the other aspect of this, but all this is sort of covered by the form-based code checklist. So our review is less dramatic than it might otherwise be. And I know that you went through a lot of stuff on the what do I want to call it? The parking management plan.
Yeah.
So I think there's not a lot more that we have to go through at this point. I did find that it was interesting that the jog in the right of way, but that's between the city and, again, that's not a zoning issue at this point.
That's correct.
No.
The city's actually, desiring more land to own, and we're providing that to them, along with, easement and a right of way for the extension of Pine Street.
Yeah. Okay. Good. If there aren't other questions from the board, I'm going to see if there's anything else you want to have as part of your presentation, and then I would actually invite the public, people who are wanting to speak, to participate.
Okay, so we'll get into public comment, Brad.
Yeah, that's
Okay. So top of the list of folks who raised their hand, not sure who it is, but Listman Leckerling. If you'd like to speak, introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. I'm Chris Jensen, and I'm an attorney with Listman Leckerling. Apologize for not correcting the title on the Zoom. Haven't quite figured this business out yet. And I'm coming a little bit late to this party, but looking, we represent Doug Cheeseman, Manny Leone, and Mike Green. Looking at this project, my primary concern would be that the height of the proposed structure is significantly taller than neighboring properties. And excuse me, the mass, particularly from the north and the west, really looks significant to me. The other issues that I would have concerns about are, and I haven't had a chance to review it, are the transportation demand plan, because we've got, we certainly have parking issues in this area. I know that there are no parking requirements under the new zoning, but that I think is something that we've got to take into account. The height and the mass of the building is going to also have an impact on the light in the general area. And finally, I understand that this is a brownfield property. I don't know that that is a zoning issue, but that certainly is something that the neighbors would have concerns about.
Am I muted?
Who is that?
This is Grace Siffo from Nedde Real Estate.
Okay, did you, okay, I'm not going to go, before you,
Scott,
I'll go in.
can you
Grace.
take down the renderings?
Sure.
Before you get going, Grace, and I'm getting your name again at Listman, with the other, I don't want to do an individual back and forth. If I can get the whole scope of what your concerns are, then we can try to address them.
That's fine. That's pretty much my list.
Okay.
And again, I apologize. I'm coming late to the party, so I don't, have a song and dance on each one. But I think they're pretty self-explanatory.
Can we get your mailing address, please?
Sure. 84 Pine Street,
Awesome.
05401.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I think if it's okay, I'd rather go through the several other members of the public and then have Doug or Grace respond to these things. That's all right.
Let's go with Michael Green next.
Okay. Michael?
Hi, Michael Green. I am a resident, tenant at my office at 84 Pine Street, 4th floor. Residence address 276 South Union Street. My concerns are, as I read through the staff report and can see that I don't know the, so there are many terms of art in the zoning ordinance, but when I see the requirements for your discretion to allow the additional height, it said A was slender, vertically oriented proportions. And while I think this building has a lot to say for itself, I wouldn't use those adjectives to describe the upper stories. I think it's quite, especially from the, I guess your north-south elevation, it's quite massive and monolithic. It would be helpful, I'd say, from my view, if there were, I didn't see anything in the drawings that showed the actual streetscape of how it compared, where it fits in, but there's a driveway between it and the, well, I guess now the 77 Pine, and there's a driveway between it and the building to the south, but I didn't see a drawing of that, which would have certainly helped me understand how it would fit in with the streetscape. I don't know, it's typical in submissions like that to have that, but I thought that would have been helpful for me. Part B of 14.6.4 talks about upper story proportions of the building are oriented and tapered, which again, not an adjective that I would have in common parlance applied to this, and or separate into separate masses in order to retain sky view. Again, that's not what I see here. So, it'd be helpful for me to see, I'm not skilled at looking at renderings or drawings, but I don't see that as an apt description of these upper stories.
I sort of went through some of that myself as I was looking at it. So it's really the height issues. Then we have one other person to speak.
Yep. Michael, can we get your mailing address, please?
84 Pine Street,
Okay.
4th floor.
Great. Thank you. We have Manny Leone up to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a general comment, which is that someone talked about 20% affordable units, as if that were a positive attribute of this building. I find it appalling because if you have 20% affordable units, it means you have 80% that are unaffordable. And this building dramatizes the kind of buildings that are being built in Burlington that don't meet the housing needs of Burlington. When a developer is able to come up and say that they are providing 100% affordable units, then I will be impressed. In the meantime, I'm saddened that you all can't do any better. That's a general comment that I have. As far as this particular building, I am concerned about the size and height of the building. My experience in Burlington and in other cities is that tall residential buildings make lousy communities, lousy neighborhoods in proportion to how large and how tall they are. And we seem to be embarked here on bigger and larger and taller buildings. I think it is disastrous to the quality of Burlington. And I think one of the problems that this building dramatizes is that we all tend to look at these buildings as if they were individual projects. They're not, they're part of a collective expansion downtown. So I think it's necessary to look at the collective impact of these buildings in terms of the massing, in terms of the quality of the neighborhood, in terms of the parking issues. I am, all I can suggest to you as a development review board is that up to now, you seem to be using the present laws, the code in particular, to justify your approval of these buildings. I'm hoping that you will get to a point where the disastrous nature of these individual buildings assumes a collective impact that is sufficient to get you to understand that the problem in this case and in all the other adjoining cases in the Big Pit, potentially at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, that the collective impact makes it very clear that the code is deeply flawed. And I urge you at some point to have the courage to take a stand against it and propose that we return to some modest version of more traditional zoning and more traditional respect for the particular qualities that Burlington has that are not characteristic of New York or other large cities. I am concerned about the parking and traffic. I would emphasize or I would second what Michael Green had to say about the parking and traffic. I think that this area right now is quiet. We're under a pandemic, but I think our experience here is that there never was adequate parking. We have now removed all the public parking that was in the big bid. We've removed the public parking garage. I think not only will the residential members of this community suffer, but I think that the commercial members of this community will suffer, that the merchants will suffer, the business downtown will suffer. Because in fact, I might be nearsighted, but I don't see that there's any real long-term parking and traffic plan for the central part of Burlington. So I urge you to stop at this project and take a hard look. Those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny.
You probably
Can I get your mailing address, please?
84 Pine Street,
Great, thank you.
right across the street.
I don't see any other hands up, Brad,
Yeah.
to speak to this project.
I mean, there's a lot of food for thought. It's a lot of what we're bound by, and maybe Manny's asking you for a little rebellion here, and the parking and the height, all the form-based code are things that went through the planning commission and the city council and becomes what we're supposed to be using as a guidance. As we have to look at what our realm of interpretation is as we go through this. I think Grace or Doug, did you want to respond to some of those questions that or concerns that people were raising?
Brad, this is Jeff. I have one question for the applicant related to this, what we just heard.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time. I work right around the corner from this building. I know the area well, but I'm having a hard time placing this building in context because the renderings and other materials you've given us don't really show the streetscape around you and how it compares in size to some of the existing buildings. It would be helpful to me to have something that gives us a better sense, at least for the buildings to sort of the south and north and maybe across the street, just to understand how 10 stories compares to, the height of those buildings.
That, I'll ask maybe Mary or Scott, that used to be actually a criteria or a request in terms of all applications to show an elevation of the buildings in context. Is that not part of the form-based code to do that? Or is that just?
That is not part of the form checklist that the staff goes through.
Yeah.
Well, so Mary, is it something we can ask for though, given that the up to 10 is with DRB approval? It seems like we have the ability to ask for additional information since it's not just the 6 stories that would be subject to staff approval, right?
Correct. The extra height is discretionary by this board's review. To be clear, they're not asking for 10, they're asking for 9 stories.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I do have photographs that, that we can share of the building site and views from all directions.
Do you have
with the rendering of the building in it though?
I'll just need oh, thank you, Scott. That might work as well.
The existing condition.
I think, Grace, it'd be helpful to see it with the building in place.
Yeah.
Right, that I can't give you. You know, we've stood on the building's footprint and taken photos of all directions, which I thought might be helpful for placemaking, but we don't have a rendering that includes the building and all and the adjacent buildings.
Oftentimes that's actually part of the submittal, so it's a little lacking here.
So I can just give you a quick overview, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
You know, the 77 pine is about 58 feet high. I'm just talking about heights. 100 pine, including their mezzanine on top, is about 114 feet or so. And I think the building right across the street is right around 68 feet. The occupants of that building might know, but I think that's what I recall, and Grace, you might know too.
Yeah.
So those are the heights of the three.
Doug, the first one you mentioned, is that what used to be 7 Burlington Square?
Well, the first one I mentioned, is the People's United Bank building.
Yeah, okay.
That's 57. And then 100 Bank Street, the one at the very end that Redstone owns, is about 100 and I think it's 116. And
it's 105, Doug, but then with the rooftop mechanical equipment, that adds another 18 feet. So
yeah. And then Grace, do you know the exact height of the building across the street?
No, because I tallied up buildings that were, similar heights, or in some cases much taller than 79, but I could certainly grab that.
But that's those are the three significant buildings around what we're proposing to build.
Yeah, and that's all that I wanted to say, was just that to the comment that there's nothing nearby that is nearly the height of our proposed building. I just wanted to point out that, for example, the Key Bank building is taller than our building, and is just separated by People's United Bank building at 77 Pine.
It's helpful. Thank you.
And I'm looking at this picture because of the elevation of Pine Street and 100 Bank being similar height. 100 Bank would actually be, from a skyline standpoint, if you're standing in front of this building, taller, because it would be up higher, elevated, right?
That's correct. The grade change might be maybe 6 or 8 feet, I'm guessing, and then they're another. If we're 104, they're with their parapet and everything. Grace had the number. I'm missing it, but they were around 120.
Did I have the number? I'm sorry that it's not in the list that I prepared for this meeting, but I'd be certainly happy to provide any total heights for the board either this evening or tomorrow.
And then I think City Place. That
I can speak to. Yeah. So when City Place was voted on, by Burlington residents and approved for construction in 2016, it was slated to be 176 feet. 176 feet. So I'm unsure of the proposed building height right now, but at 10 stories, I can assume that it will be taller than 79 Pine Street, and that's very nearby. And something will happen there eventually, so that's something to keep in mind.
Jeff, was that helpful?
Yeah, that was helpful. I'll give some thought to whether I think a rendering is needed, but that was helpful for context.
Okay. I mean, I think in the big picture, I think the way your code reads the way it is I think the city wants more density in its downtown. And, we're creating a walkable, bikeable, busable environment here. And like most cities have, and to do that, you have to have some density, and that's what we're proposing. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
I agree with you, Doug, that what you're proposing is what seems to be the intent of the change of the codes. But not everybody's at one with that. But,
I have another question. If you were, for each floor that you would maybe be required to reduce this by, if the board reduced it, how many affordable units would the project be reduced by?
Well, I don't have that exact number, but if you just divide it equally, each floor might have 5 apartments, so it'd be 20% of 5, which would be 1, I suppose, right? Yeah. But it's also interesting, when we were in front of the DAB a week ago, they felt a shorter building would not work as well in the neighborhood, and thought it would be a mistake to lop off a bunch of floors on this building. And I don't
Yes.
know who was here other than me that heard that, but maybe, I don't know what they wrote up in their summary, but that's what I heard pretty clearly.
That's right, Doug, and they approved the design unanimously, and they were very complimentary to Greg Gossens, the architect, because we really strove to create a really special design with this building that does taper as it elevates, and also the footprint of the neighboring buildings is quite a bit larger than ours. So to have something that refers, in terms of scale, the idea of making it at the footprint that it is, but shortening it, to me, really, I'm not connecting all of those dots, but of course, that might not be for me to, that we all can have our opinion, but I really think that some of the interest and what makes the building really unique and attractive comes at the top. The last 3 stories, the upper 3 stories.
I'll just mention this building dimension, it's somewhere around 76 feet by 75 feet. It's a skinny building. I mean, in comparison, the bank building next door is 200 and some odd feet, and it's all the city, certainly City Place will be a couple hundred feet long. It's not a huge mass, in my opinion. It's a building that's 76 feet wide.
Well, this is Greg Gossens. The DAB, they were, I think somebody had mentioned, as DAB members, pretty much to a person, felt like the building height or the building design would be compromised if it were shorter. And I'm not sure if that's codified in any of the minutes, but I know that is a statement of fact for the conversation that went on.
I think we have, and this is something we would talk about, I think, during deliberative, we have some criteria to review this with, and the question is the terraces and the setbacks and articulation that happens on the building. Does that give us something to hold on to approve the extra height? That's, I think, that what will come up for us. I think we're bound by the zoning ordinance that's in front of us, and that's the criteria we need to look at it by. So, are there other questions from the board at this point? I guess they're not. I think that we will close the public hearing. We will see when we deliberate. I'm not quite sure what happens with that. And then we have the option to, if we need more information or have other questions, we can always reopen the hearing if we have to. So we will close the public hearing at this point. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Okay. We have one more. Form-based code application. More discussion of height, less height, but still more height. And that is for 157, 159 South Champlain Street.
Yeah, we have the applicant team here. Just need to find them and fish them out.
Okay.
So Nathan and Don, I know you two are involved. Is there anyone else that I should be able to speak for you? And do you want to present, or should I drive like the last time?
Hi, Scott. Thanks. This is Nate. Peter Smyer and Kurt Muller from VHB should be in the waiting room.
Okay.
And also John Light should be in there as well.
And
it's fine for you to drive, Scott, if you don't mind, that'd be great.
And are there members of the public here as well?
Anyone who'd like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. See 1, 2. We have David Slansky, who's a neighboring property owner, and Steve. Just Steve.
Okay.
So I'll let David and Steve talk as well for swearing in.
Okay, I see everybody here. So I'm going to ask everybody who's going to speak or participate in this hearing to swear that you tell the truth and whole truth on pain and penalty of perjury. Do you?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
I do.
I do.
Okay. Then I'll ask Nathan or whoever's, do you want to start the presentation? And if you want Scott to post something, let us know what would be helpful.
Great. Thanks, Brad. If we could start just with a perspective view, Scott, that'd be great. Yeah, that works right there. Thank you. So thanks again, everyone. We have a pretty exciting project here. We think this is a great fit for Burlington. We've got a new infill project on a site that's sat vacant for many, many years. It's a very challenging site. A lot of people in Burlington are aware of this block and some of the contamination challenges with this block. Our team has put together an approach that will clean up this site for good and put a nice new residential building on the site with 32 new units. The building is located adjacent to August 1st Bakery, and we will be achieving LEED Gold certification for this project. So part of the development team, I'm here. And John Light is also here as part of the team. We have Don Welch, the architect, Peter Smyer, civil engineer, and Kurt Muller, our environmental expert. So at this point, I will turn it over to you, Don, to give a presentation on the architectural features of the building.
Great. Hi, everyone. Scott, could you switch to the perspective, the northeast corner perspective? It also shows the Boleyn House. Or yeah, actually, can you share screen so I can pull up the rendering?
So you want to drive?
Yeah, can I drive?
Sure. Give me a moment. Okay, Don, you should be able to share your screen.
If you're talking, you're muted, Don.
Everybody hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So we're asking for an additional 12 feet, I guess, above what can be approved administratively, or an additional floor. To mitigate the height of the building, we've recessed the first floor back about 6 feet from the primary facade, casting it more in shadow, and I think making the overall massing of the building appear lighter. We've also divided the primary facade into 3 bays, and then again broke the middle bay down into 3 more bays. The northeast and the southeast and south and northeast corners have been recessed or set back from the primary facade a little over 11 feet. I think softening the mass and also allowing more light down into the neighboring properties. The central bay is broken up into a band of granite with flanking brick cladding on each side. The windows are all stacked vertically with a horizontal orientation too. We think that there are decks that are cantilevered out on each floor that also help to break down the overall massing of the building, but also provide scale and I think visual interest. The second floor does read horizontal. It's a public space with big windows. We're proposing a gymnasium or a gym in that space. So thinking that the bigger windows and the ability to see in will liven up the streetscape a little bit. We've mixed the materials with the brick and the granite, as I mentioned, with wood panels. Certainly the wood panels and storefront glass along the first floor. Any area that is more adjacent, I guess, to pedestrian access or people, we've softened. We've worked to soften at least the northeast corner and held that side of the building back as much as we can from the property line, allowing as much light and the least amount of shadow possible onto the blend house. We've created what we were calling a sort of a pocket park between the two buildings that the civil engineer can talk a little bit more about, but will be planted in soft and green and accessible to both buildings. In our DAB review, the proposed parapet height is 42 inches, and we talked a little bit about potentially reducing that 2 feet, getting us back within the 55, I guess, maximum with the 5% additional. That would get us back under the 5% additional. There was a little bit of conversation. Some people felt that the building looked better with the additional 2 feet, and others felt that maybe it should come back. We should knock it down, but that's an option too. Yeah, I guess that's it from my end.
Thanks, Don. I think we'll send it over to Kurt if you're available to talk a little bit about the challenges of this site. It's a brownfield site that Kurt can talk a little bit more about.
Would you like me to stop the share, Scott or Kurt?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Good evening, all. Kurt Muller, VHB Environmental Consultant. Nate hired us last year to perform a phase 1 environmental site assessment on the property, at which point we identified that there was a former dry cleaner located in the 151 parcel, which is this.
Could we see a site plan as you're doing this?
Certainly.
I know Don could show that, or somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, I can pull up a site plan.
Great, thanks. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, not at all. I'll wait till the site plan's up, and then I think it's easier for all to reference. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the location plan. Is there a particular plan you want to go down to, Kurt?
Just the plan view of the parcel. It may be 2 or 3 pages in. That one will work wonderfully. Perfect. Thank you very much. So as you can see, the 157 parcel is the subject parcel. We did a phase 1 environmental site assessment on that property and identified that there was a former auto repair facility as well as a foundry on that property. There had been historically some releases of petroleum, minor PCBs, some metals, as well as potentially some PAHs, which are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. In addition, in the phase 1, we also identified the fact that there was a former dry cleaner at the 151 parcel, and that is the northeast of the property there. And so as a result, there was known both groundwater as well as soil vapor impacts that were migrating onto this 157 parcel. Again, the source is at 151, not 157. So as we transition from the phase 1 to the phase 2, Nate entered into the BRELA program, the Brownfield program, and the BRELA program, which is the liability protection program through the DEC. He was accepted, and DEC went as far as to actually fund the phase 2 investigation, which was great. And so in doing so, we were able to confirm the nature and extent of the contamination, both laterally and vertically. And there were 2 purposes, one being determine nature and extent of contamination, but the other was to pre-characterize the soil for for offsite disposal. The important piece of that is the fact that because of this project, there's approximately 3,000 yards of material that will be coming out of this hole essentially to put the garage in. And as a result, all of that contaminated soil will be removed and disposed of appropriately, thus mitigating the exposure risk. Also, because there's a vapor plume that is migrating, again, underneath this property, although some of that material will be coming out with the soil, there also will be a vapor mitigation system that's proactively installed underneath this building as a just-in-case measure. So that's part of the corrective action plan. As we transition from the phase two investigation to the corrective action plan, which is now being funded by the CCRPC, or Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, we are designing that mitigation system as well as calculating the soil disposal and means and methods for that. So we should have the corrective action plan built and ready for distribution in about a month or so. Yeah, so great opportunity to clean up a dirty site in Burlington, and happy to field any questions if anybody has them.
Great, thanks so much, Kurt. And Peter, I think these slides will work great for transitioning right into to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Peter Smyer from VHB, civil engineer on the project. I'll keep this limited because I know the board has a review essentially focusing around the height, but just as a quick overview, lots about 0.3 acres. It's fairly straightforward as far as a civil and utilities standpoint, in that it's served off of the existing municipal services on South Champlain Street. And one of the things we were excited about with this property is the fact that as of now, it's occupied by some old building slabs and a gravel lot and driveway. One of the things we were able to do on this from a stormwater standpoint is, knowing this drains down to the city's combined sewer network that drains the treatment plant, we were able to collect that water and detain it and hold that water back before it goes into the combined system. So right now what happens is that water flows across some of those gravel lots and slabs to the west and across the adjacent gravel lots and the adjacent properties. So there's a decent amount of run-on volume to the lots to the west, and that has resulted in some evidence of rilling and erosion of those lots and some sediment washed into the street at the bottom of Maple Street. So just by virtue of the fact that we're putting a rooftop surface on here that's no longer gravel, there's less origination of some of that stormwater pollution, and there's also better management of some of the runoff to the adjacent lots.
Are you doing some detention as part of this?
We are. So underneath what you see on the northeast corner of the building, that darker hatch pattern, that's a pervious lot. That's that small pocket park area that Don described. But underneath that, we're putting in a detention system that connects into the street drainage network. One of the challenges we did have was with the contaminated soil. So ordinarily we look for opportunities to infiltrate our water wherever we can. But given the substantial efforts that are being made here to clean up the site and give it a clean bill of health, injecting water into the ground near this site and near the former contamination was not advisable in our opinion. So the system is essentially the pervious patio, and then combined with the detention system underneath it. So I will end my description there.
And I'll just, none of the remediation has been done at this point, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so that would be with the first stage of construction would be doing that work. So
yes, it would.
Just curious about the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And I guess I'll wrap up here. Just to seeing the site plan, we're excited about this little pocket park. It is a small opportunity, but we have a special relationship with the Blinn House, with how these lots started, and we have easements to allow a couple of parking spaces in our building for them. So we'll be kind of connecting to this Blinn House through this pocket park and having this kind of inviting area with maybe a little seating, a place to pause, a little bit of bike parking. So it's going to be a nice transition between the two buildings. And we do have planters and some greenery in the front as well. So although it's a pretty major infill project, there is we've brought some greenery in where we can. I think that's all we have, and we're happy to take questions.
I have one sort of a silly question in a way. You have one street tree that you're providing. Am I reading that correctly?
That's
Nathan?
correct.
And it just seems odd that it's right in front of your front door.
I'm a civil engineer, so we did coordinate that with our landscape architect, Mike Willard, but I will respond that there is actually some significant three-phase power that runs along the city green belt there in front of the building. And so one of the challenges we did have was trying to find a tree that was of a scale that would fit under there correctly.
Okay.
We did coordinate with city arborist to match the lilac that you can see to the south of our driveway, just so we had some uniformity. But that was one of our challenges, was sort of fitting everything in with that overhead power.
Okay. That answers my question about why it's there. Thank you. Are there questions from any members of the board at this point? Let's see people here. Yeah. Again, this is, with the form-based code, it looks like you have a fairly, I guess I would say, aggressive management parking project in terms of how the parking works and your what's called ride share happening. So that helps meet that criteria. Any other questions? I have a question for staff, and this is sort of general with this application and the other application we've talked about a little bit, is, and we've asked for it on some projects, but it seems to me it's not really up to the applicant as much as somehow the city to be getting some data about how these projects, with all the changes we've had in the parking requirements, is how they're working out. And whether, I think we had a report a while back on one of them, but is that something that the planning commission or the staff is contemplating happening in the future?
Well, the TDM has annual reporting requirements with it now. And we had done a very informal ad hoc follow-up analysis, but the TDM standard in place now has an annual reporting requirement.
Does that give us an idea of how the public is perceiving the success or not success of the parking situation?
How the public perceives it?
Yeah, because that's really the question here. Is not just, I say the public and also the applicant of the building. We're changing the parking a lot and saying that we don't have to have all these parking spaces here. And, it may be a question of having the merchants downtown to give us, and some of it may be anecdotal data and may be hard to analyze, but it just seems having some review that we get feedback on it. The TDM is just saying, are we successful within the criteria that we set up and are they meeting their goals? But to look at a larger question as to how is that working for the city?
That will give us actual numbers. That will give us numbers on actual parking demand associated with a given project.
So it will, if people aren't able to park their cars, it will be saying that.
Well, I think first the TDM is relatively new for the changes in the parking regulations.
Yeah.
And we've only had a handful of these come through so far.
Right.
What's been unique to each application is, well, there are no minimum parking standards. Each one of these projects is providing parking. So they're required to manage their own parking.
Yeah.
So, unbundling parking from rents is going to be different project to project. Participation within the building is going to be different.
Yeah.
So it is this very individualized management and the annual reporting coupled with public transit availability with each project. So it's really not a boilerplate.
No. Well, I think I don't want to take up this applicant with this kind of conversation, maybe, because this is not, they have a very elaborate, looks like a very good parking demand management plan as part of the application. So this may be something for another discussion.
Well, lastly, I'd only mention that the TDM management is a condition of approval, and it will be a zoning violation if it's not continued. So
Right.
there's something that sticks to these projects.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions for the board for this applicant? And for the applicant, any other things that you want to add at this point?
All set on my end. Anybody else, feel free to jump in if you have anything.
It looks like a very nice project. I think, well, I guess we'll discuss the what is done for the height issue in deliberative.
There are two members of the public.
Yep, that's my mind, Mary. So David Slansky, if you want to pipe in.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I met Mr. Dagesse, at least over the phone, and he's been very pleasant and professional to deal with. And I own the Blinn house next door, and I also own the Pomeroy house, which is to the back of this property. And at one point I owned this property. I guess I'm not sure it's that relevant, but some of the contamination history I might understand a little differently. But I do think once somebody digs there, they do have to get the dirt out of there. I'm not sure that there's a situation that needs to be remediated if you leave things as they are. But my primary reason for wanting to be heard, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so, is shading. And we have not gotten a shading study on this, despite asking a few times. And I'm sure that it's, first off, I admire Nathan and his team for the bravery, because this is a big project and there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And I think it's not a great looking site right now. And so I think there's a lot of good that can come from this. And I don't want to sort of mistake my small issue for the big picture. But if you look at the picture that's up there, I think the reason why we're not getting a shading study is because it's brutal. It's basically a wall that's going to block out the sun, because as far as I understand it, that sun comes up on the south. And I have really nice tenants in the Blinn house. And I don't know, I'm not opposing the project. I'm not saying that, I'm just wanting to have an open discussion. I don't know if this is within the scope of what you all consider, but I'd like to surface it, because if there's anything that can be done to make it, I mean, the pocket park, all that stuff, my sense of them is that's decency and it's consideration, but some of it also might be a little bit of a accommodation for something that's not mitigable. And so I just don't know that. And I don't know whether alternative views of different heights, different configurations, different massings would lead to different shadings, but I can't assess that. It's a quantitative study and I still haven't seen it. And I wonder if it's in your ambit to ask for that, but I do think it's worthy of discussion.
Is that part of the form-based code process, Mary?
There is no requirement to provide shading information within the checklists.
Is it okay for me to jump in, or do we want to wait? Because I do have updates on the shading analysis.
Okay, well, there's one other person, I appreciate it, Nathan. There's one other person who wanted to speak from the public. That was Steve. If you could introduce yourself. And
Steve, before we get into Steve, Dave, need your mailing address. So sorry.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to give you a business address if that's okay.
As long as you can get mail there.
Okay, 48 Green Street, Vergennes, Vermont, 05491.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and Steve, if you can introduce yourself and give Scott your address.
Yeah, my name is Steve McKenzie. My address is 162 Battery Street. I'm a neighbor of David, who owns the building next door at 166. And I'm a butter to the west for the project. I'm in favor of the project. It's good to see more housing downtown, and I'm not really concerned about parking. Brad, to address your comment about parking, for anecdotal information, we moved above our office about 8 years ago, live in a one-bedroom apartment upstairs. And we sold one of our 2 cars, and we probably drive maybe 2 days a week to the grocery store. That's about it. So for us, we love living in a walkable circumstance. So I'm sure the people that live here have that same experience in terms of being less dependent on the car and getting more exercise, especially if you have a couple dogs. So I do like the idea of seeing something like this happen. I just had a couple questions really for Don, the architect, and maybe whoever did the landscape, which is, I'm not sure, Don, about compliance with the code with the setback. Maybe you can answer this, but typically when you're between 5 and 10 feet, you're restricted to no more than 25% of the surface area of the exterior wall for opening. So maybe you know the answer, but it seems like you're probably over the allowable amount of opening square footage because of that particular setback. So it seems like that's something that would have to be looked at in terms of code compliance. Maybe you know offhand, but something again to check out. The other is looking at the grading plan and the amount of fall. It's just a thought because from our standpoint, it's not really a building that has a backside. It's pretty visible from all 4 sides. And it'd be nice to see a bit of landscaping treatment on the west side as well, whatever the setback ends up being. There's about 5 feet of exposed concrete wall at the base of the building. So even with 6 foot setback, there's an opportunity for some sort of landscaping treatment or a vertical garden or something to that effect for the base of the building. So, but my compliments otherwise for going LEED Gold. I think that's great. And again, I'm in favor otherwise of the project. Don't have any issues as far as height, certainly, or the number of units.
Thank you. And good. I'll just mention, I think the openings, I think that's a building code issue, which is not in our purview, but Public Works should be reviewing that as part of their code review. And Nathan, did you want to follow up on the shadow study information?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So thank you, David, for your question on the shadow drawings. We have done the shadow analysis, and I did send it over to your colleague, Rafaela, a week and a half ago. So I apologize that you did not see that. We've been working with David back and forth trying to show him what the shadowing will look like on the Blinn House. I do have them here in front of me. I don't know if this is the right venue, but I can make sure those get to you, David. They're a large file, so it would be in a link. But we absolutely have those. They were put together by a professional. So that's something to look at. There's no doubt that this building is going to impact the sun and the shading on the Blinn House, but I personally was pleasantly surprised to see that there's a lot of morning and afternoon sun that still hits the eastern and western facade because of the fact that they're both at the same plane on South Champlain. Our building does not step in front of the Blinn House. So there's actually, in my opinion, this is where obviously there's different viewpoints. There's still a decent amount of sun considering the size of the building. But I'm happy to share those now, or I can just send these to David separately. It's really up to the DRB on that.
Is that something you can easily share right now?
It is a video, so I'm not sure how that'll work through Zoom, but you allow me to share a screen, we can try.
Okay, give me a moment. Okay, Nathan, if you can get it on your screen, you can share it.
Okay, great. Let's see. I don't. Okay, yeah, here we go. All right, let's just give this a try and we'll see if it loads okay. So there's several views. We don't probably want to look at all of them. I'll pick the summer solstice, so there'll be a little higher sun. And this is this is looking west. And there's a little tag on the bottom that's going to talk about time of day. So let me just start this over here. So down here, you'll see time of day, and it's going to go through blocks of time. So you can see we're starting in the morning here, looking at the Blinn House to the right, the new building proposed on the left, and you can just watch the sun play through, hopefully. So you'll see up till about even past noon is when it starts to fade on the eastern side. And then it comes back in towards the evening. And then let me play that same view, looking east now. Or sorry, the same time of year, but looking east. So morning, the sun's up, going over the new building. And then we're at noon now, and it starts to light up on the western facade. So yeah, no doubt there's impacts, but I was pleasantly surprised to see how there's still a considerable amount of morning and afternoon sun on those two east sides of the building. So again, happy to work with you, David, on anything we can do to minimize that. We did push the building back off of the property line, basically the maximum the code allows. So we pushed it back as far as we could from that direction as well.
Yeah, so Nathan, thanks for that. And, you know, I did get them. I guess they're just huge files and nobody put them in my inbox. So that's my technical stupidity. It sounds like the winter is going to be tougher, and maybe I need to look at those and touch base with you. But I appreciate you doing the studies as discussed.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, take a look. Let me know. The winters are certainly much more difficult. But we can certainly work together on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I had one follow-up question for you, Nathan, on the landscaping, which was raised by Steve McKenzie. Is that, and I'm not really sure the line between our purview and the landscaping is part of the form-based code, right, Mary?
Correct.
Okay, but there's no, I'll ask the question anyways, there's no landscaping on the west side of the building, and there would be an opportunity to do that, wouldn't there? Something to soften it?
It would not be a requirement, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Nathan,
I think we would be happy to look at that. Honestly, we hadn't thought a lot about that, screening that side. It's just not been our focus right now, but I think it's a great point. And it's not a huge space, but we'd be happy to work with the neighbors on, you know, what we can fit in there. That's sounds like a great idea.
Okay, thank you. So I've heard from the public and questions from the board. I think we're good. And Nathan or any of the other team, if you have anything else you want to add at this point.
All set on my end.
Okay, then we are good, and we will close the public hearing. And at the end of this meeting, we'll discuss deliberating today, which may happen. We'll see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, we have one other item, 125 South Cove Road, demolish an existing house and replace with a new single-family home. And is the applicant here for this one?
Yes. The owner, then Cliff Deachin, I believe you wanted to present, Cliff.
And are there any members of the public here on this one?
There's folks from the public who'd like to speak on this item. Raise your hand and let us know. I don't see any hands, Brad.
Okay, so is it David and Cliff? Are those the two people represent? Okay, so both David and Cliff, if you would swear that you would tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury. I see Keith Wagner too. So I'm still waiting for it. I do.
I do.
Okay. There are some concerns relating to the site on this project and the form of the building relative to the code. So that's part of the concern that we want to look at on this. So I don't know who's making the presentation right now.
I will, if I could take the screen.
Okay,
Yep, you can.
Hi, thanks for reviewing us tonight and the opportunity to present the existing site factors, the interests, and certainly our needs for this house at South Cove. Right, so we would like to continue the discussions on the main topic that the DAB has recommended, a redesign of our home. The issue is the ordinance for garages. Here is the chapter that we're discussing. A parking structure, either attached or detached, shall be set back from the longest street-facing wall of the principal structure and be differential yet consistent in character and design. So we believe to understand the intent of this ordinance is based on aesthetic principles to prevent prominent and potentially unsightly or ill-proportioned garage bumps on the front of houses, especially located on dense lots with tight city lots and shallow front yards, which like these diagrams are showing the development review standards. This is prevalent in most of Burlington. Our project site is on the west side of South Cove Road and is designated LL for large lot, which is very different and unique to the rest of Burlington. In fact, this is one of 3 designated LL lots in Burlington, so it's quite unique. Our lot has generous front yard setbacks. Here I'm locating you. There's South Cove Road. So there's our front yard, modest side yard setbacks, and then beautiful rear yard right on the lake shore with its own setback restrictions. So we have needed to locate our house structure over the existing footprint of the house that we are removing. This is to take advantage of the existing small but highly functional full height basement space. There's considerable rock ledge everywhere down there, as we all know. And what we don't want to do is have to get into any blasting, which would be not only expensive, but very disturbing for the neighborhood and certainly the natural character of the site. Here's our foundation plan. This section right here is where we have a full height basement existing that we're going to take advantage of. And that hash mark on the first floor, that's the space below that we're locating in the building footprint. The existing homes in the neighborhood span from the 1960s to the present. Most notable for consideration are the adjacent properties, all of which have garages set forward from the main faces of their homes. Certainly, understandably, these homes were all built obviously prior to the garage ordinance that we're addressing today, but the building type does form a strong character and rhythm to the street, which is very recognizable. Here's South Cove and the lake. And the adjacent homes, 135 and 111, are there and there, 135 and 111. And then the 2 flanking homes, 99 and 159, all have front yard or garages that set in front of their homes. So our home design upholds and complements this type of simple building layout. We've taken special architectural consideration and incorporated the garage space into the main footprint of the home. Try to lessen this impact. Here's a nice landscape plan by Keith and his group. So there's the garage space embedded partially into the house. Driveway right to South Cove Road. So here's our generous front yard, which we're trying to protect for the neighborhood. Nice new landscaping, new deciduous trees for screening. An outdoor patio space in front of the home. That's one outdoor living area. A covered porch right there in front of the home. Again, giving a nice layering to the front of the house. Side yards, as you can see, and then the lakeside. There's also a nice curve to South Cove Road, which our home is emulating as well from tip of the adjacent homes. Okay, so a nice rhythm to the street. So with living space above the garage, dormers, and a vocabulary of shingle style detailing, we've given the front of the house great character and prowess so as to lessen the visual impact of a garage plus a house. But I blended a design and created a tasteful home appropriate for its neighborhood site. So this clause from the development review standards supports this notion that we're trying to encourage us to consider. Stating shall maintain existing development pattern and rhythm of structures along the existing streetscape. New buildings should be aligned with the front facade of neighboring buildings to reinforce the existing street edge. Located in such a way that complements, again, the existing natural features and landscapes. So in closing, we feel the ordinance was not necessarily designed nor intended for this type of deep front yard designated LL or large lot site, but more for smaller, denser lots with homes sitting closer to the street, very prevalent in Burlington. And so with all the consideration of our site's constraints and our project's beautiful property and the existing character of South Cove neighborhood, we're hoping that there would be a consideration to allow the garage face as designed to sit a little proud of our main face of the building. Thank you.
Cliff, there's two other issues that were raised in the staff report. One had to do with the deck or something on the lakeside. There were some issues with that in terms of the footprint.
Right, so back in the, we met with the conservation board and this was brought up. I don't know, Scott, if you want to even address that, because it did seem like we were right inside of that setback, but it was actually deemed okay.
Landscape element.
I'm sorry?
Oh, it was just defined as a landscape element.
Right.
So the only problem that I can tell, I guess you're sharing, so I can't point to it. The walkway is fine. That's an expressly allowed encroachment. And the retaining walls are also okay as expressly allowed encroachments. But the westernmost, I guess it's the southwesternmost corner of the stone dust patio encroaches, looks like what, maybe 2 or 3 feet past the permissible line. So that would need to be made green or pulled back.
Okay. That's easily modified. It was just an intermediate area coming off the deck to a mid terrace before you go down the slab steps, which are integrated into a planting bed. So we can modify that.
Yeah. The driveway width is not a dimension on the driveway, but I assume, how wide is the driveway, Keith or Cliff?
We made it 18 feet, the required minimum, and we discussed this with the DAB, having a turnaround section right there in front of the garage.
Well, it's a very nice looking house, but we will have to sort of chew on this issue of the zoning requirement. One could make the argument that a large lot would have an easier time meeting the requirement than a harder time, but I guess we'll have to look at that. Those are the main issues. I think everything else looked good on there. Are there questions that anybody on the board has for the applicant?
Ed?
Yeah, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you pull up the foundation plan again? I was a little confused by what you were saying there. Are you going to need to do blasting now for other portions of the foundation?
No, what we're wanting to avoid that. So this area right there is where there is quote unquote full height. We have about 8 feet
Okay.
already available on the site. Everything around it is ledge and would be crawl space. So what we're trying to do is hold that line. We really need to hold that line for the face of our house so we can incorporate it into the house in usable space for utilities.
But that wouldn't prevent you from moving the garage further back.
No, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I was just gonna look at, if you go back to that site plan for a second, Cliff. Yeah, that one. So are you pretty close to having the house on a setback on the north and south sides at this point?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, for large lot, it's fitting a home of size. We're needing to go to the boundaries, north and south. Obviously protecting as much as we can for lakeside living and having good livable space facing the lake. That's the beauty of this neighborhood and this side of South Cove.
Yeah.
So being creative with design, having as much opportunity for that lakeside living as possible. Kind of deemed that the garage sits a little forward from the house.
You have a little side entrance off of the laundry room. Is that what I'm looking at on the south side there?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Off the garage.
Living space. Correct.
Yep.
Rear of the house.
Okay. I guess the location of the garage is something we will debate at deliberative.
So Brad,
Yes.
just a brief 2 cents here.
Yeah.
So the large lot overlay has been mentioned, and it's a real thing, but it only pertains to the minimum lot size. Basically, it's 9,900 square feet. Some of the, well, more than some, arguably, depending on who you talk to, of the design standards are pretty squishy, but this one's actually pretty clear. Says the parking structure, either attached or detached, shall be set back from the longest street facing the wall of the principal structure. So that's the hang up here.
And is the face of the entry porch, is that?
No, that's why the standard, again, is clear. It refers to the longest
face
wall of the principal structure.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see how that wreaks havoc with the plan. Okay.
Hey, Cliff, can you bring up that section 6.3, which is the standard? Yeah, there it is. This is Mike Boardman, the applicant, and this is the first time I've come before the Burlington DRB, and I'm lived here most of my life, but I'm tried to study all this language as this issue came up in this whole development review standards. And when I read through the role of these design standards, I keep coming back to this page 3 here, and part of it's highlighted there where and you can read it there, but it says that these application of these principles and standards involve value-based design and decision-making requiring balancing of complex factors, interests, and needs. And then the next sentence, in applying these citywide development principles and design standards, particular attention shall be given to the context of the development proposal and achieving conformance with the purpose of the district in which the project is located. And when I read that, I just find, I'm trying to figure out the intent of this, and that's what Cliff was saying earlier. I think the intent of this standard was smaller smaller lot neighborhoods where the garage was just going to protrude and dominate the house. And I'm just finding it hard to believe that that's the intent, is to rent a house of this stature. And you don't, the garage I don't see is protruding and dominating the house. So maybe I'm misinterpreting this and not reading it correctly, but it does seem like it's some flexibility here, that you got to recognize where this neighborhood is.
Well, trouble is that it could actually work in reverse from the logic that you're applying. You know, in that with the large lot, one would think you'd have more room to be able to do these kinds of things. And your view is you have less necessity to do those kinds of things. So I understand that.
Well, I was thinking it was aesthetically too. It just doesn't dominate the house, which I thought that's why that was initially put in place way back in 2008. Some of these neighborhoods were built with garages dominating.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem to be the intent in this neighborhood, but.
Scott, do you have any perspective on that highlighted section? And I guess I'm also interested in the two bullets above it, the development principles and the design standards. It does seem to say very specifically that design standards include both required, quote, shall, and flexible should components. So I understand what the applicant's saying, but I'm trying to understand what you view the intent of those multiple provisions to be.
Well, what's on the screen right now is basically the introduction that sets the context for the standards in Article 6. And you got to scroll down a little bit to get into the specific standards. And there are recommendations and there is flexibility, but there are a few shall items. You have to at least do this. And putting the face of the garage behind the longest street facing, or the longest street facing section of the principal structure, that's a shall.
And I guess the conflict then is the chapter here where it says shall maintain existing development pattern and rhythm of structures along the existing streetscape, which clearly there is on that South Cove side of the street.
Were there any members of the public here, Scott? I didn't think so.
Nobody raised their hand. Last chance. If you'd like to weigh in, raise your hand. Okay. No hands, Brad.
Okay. I think we understand the issues and the views related to it. If there's anything else that David or Cliff or Keith wants to add at this point. Okay.
I'm all set.
Okay, so I think we'll be deliberating tonight, but we will find out as we get to the end of our agenda tonight. We have one item after this. So, okay, we will close the public hearing. Thank you. So we have one other item, which is sketch plan for 278 Main Street. I see.
We have Bob Duncan.
Yeah.
And Bob, let me know who else.
It
is Jonathan showing up, Jonathan Farrell showing up in your list?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Scott, it is unusual for us to have, it seems it's unusual to have staff comments on sketch plan. Is that right? Or am I just misremembering?
You're remembering the one case wherein we had sketch plan and somehow I neglected to post my comments. We usually post them.
Selective memory on my part. Okay. So this is a sketch plan for an addition to an existing building on Main Street. Bob and Jonathan, if you want to take it away and make your presentation, and somebody will hopefully have a screen share in this process too.
Scott, I'd like to screen share. Do you, since this is sketch, do you need us to swear in or we don't have
No.
to swear in on sketch?
No.
So we
No
can
problem.
lie today?
Yes,
It's
you
not
can.
nighttime. Okay.
Give me a second, Bob. I'll
Okay.
promote you. All right, you're all set, Bob.
Mute. Just 1 second, I'm getting the right thing on my screen and share screen. So are you seeing a site plan there?
Yep. We are.
Okay, great, thank you. So Bob Duncan from Duncan Wisniewski Architecture and Jonathan Farrell, who's works for COTS, here to talk about this. We're proposing a project at 278 Main Street. So if you're familiar with the site, it's the current location of the COTS Family Shelter on Main Street. It's across from Edmonds School, and it's one lot east of the intersection of Main Street and South Winooski. So the, I'm not sure if I can show you, make my cursor work here. But right above the word site plan, you see sort of a heavy dark line. That's the building perimeter of, I believe it's called Consolidated Telephone, that's west of this property. And so we have a lot size of about 18,000 square feet. The existing building, which is an historic building, had an addition built in 1991 when it changed, when the YWCA did a slight expansion of that building. And then COTS, I believe it was about 2003, developed this for its family shelter. And so that 1991 addition is in between the original building and this new addition that we're proposing. The lot is high density residential, it's zoned that way. And the zoning would allow for a total of 19 units on this property. There's one existing, the existing building is considered one unit as a community house. So we'd be allowed to propose an additional 18 units. This design proposes an additional 16 units in addition to the building. We're choosing to do an addition for a couple of reasons. One is that the 25% rear yard setback is a pretty onerous setback to meet. So moving the building further away is more problematic, but also by, and most importantly, by attaching the new addition to the existing building, we're able to provide elevator access to both floors of the original building through the connection between the two. Right now, the existing historic building is accessible only at its main first floor level via a wheelchair lift that's in the 1991 addition. By connecting the two buildings, we're able to use the elevator that would be required in the new addition, which is 4 stories. The elevator can then serve by matching floor heights at the first floor and the second floor. The elevator can serve the new addition. It's a double-sided elevator. You enter from the east side into a vestibule, and the elevator then takes you up approximately half a floor to get to the main level, first floor of the new addition and first floor of the existing building. We're proposing this addition. It has 1 stair because, as you may know, there's a building code allowance that allows for not more than 4 units per floor, not more than 4 units high in a fully sprinkled building to have 1 stair. So this building will have 1 stair connected to the elevator. So we're encouraging people that enter it to use the stair instead of the elevator. And on this floor that you're seeing in combination site plan, there are only 3 units per floor. Most floors have 3. There's 1 floor with 4 units per floor. The existing site, you enter from the east side off of Main Street, and we're proposing to maintain that same entrance. And we're changing the parking somewhat, proposed to put in paved parking area here, the driveway that extends along the east side. Currently, the trash is in the northeast corner. It will remain there in a structure, a newly built structure for this. And the northwest corner will have covered bike parking. So even though we're not required to provide any parking in this district and for this use, we're providing a total of 9 spaces, one of which will be handicap accessible. And there's a little bit of open space that currently exists on the west side of the existing building that will still remain. And we also have a little bit of common space for folks on the north side of the new addition. I think I mentioned that that because of inclusionary zoning, we're allowed to go to 4 stories. I may not have mentioned that, but all the units in this building will meet the inclusionary zoning requirement, even though we're only required to meet 15%. But COTS is doing this. This is going to be housing that will facilitate moving into permanent housing from shelter or perhaps even from a homeless situation for folks. The unit sizes range from studio to 2-bedroom, and there's a mix in the total count, getting us up to the 16 units. But all of these units are permanent housing in the sense that people will live there for a long duration of time, but it is actually intended to be transitional in the sense that after a year, 2 years or something, folks would be able to move into the next step of housing. So on the sheet that's before you, elevation sheet, you're not really seeing the Main Street elevation on this sheet. The south elevation that shows here on the lower left corner is actually a section taken through where the connector is between new and existing. So you're seeing the new structure to the north of it. On the west elevation, you'll see, and also on the east elevations, you'll see the gable ends of the original brick building at fronts on 278 Main Street. A full application would show this, elevation of the Main Street building in its context. So we're proposing 4 stories, as you can see on the east elevation, which is where you'd be approaching through the driveway, kind of in the center where the gable end part of the existing building ends. The L that was added in 1991 also had a gable roof. We're proposing to remove that, put that as a flat roof as part of the connector between new and existing. And the green portion that you see there that's supported by columns is where the main entrance to this building would be. There's a vestibule entrance that you'll see there with glass doors. There's also a stair exit to the right of that where that purple siding is. And the green siding is wood siding. And at that second floor level would be a common space for residents of this addition. You'll see behind that, the sloping roof is the elevator tower, and the purple section of siding in between is the stair the one stair that you could see in plan that was on the site plan. So we've modulated the facade. This is still admittedly a work in progress. We got some good comments, I think, from DAB, but we're working on some facade modulation because the building does step back, and you'll see in the renderings in a couple of locations. But changing materials to some degree to relate a little bit more in terms of materials that are on the L of the existing building, with some horizontal lap siding and also some vertical and horizontal metal siding that fits out the rest of the facade. This perspective aerial taken looking northwest from the southeast corner. So you see the driveway that enters into the site just on the east side of the existing building. The building to the left or to the west is the Consolidated Telephone Company building, and the building to the east is an existing apartment building along that property. And these are rough approximations of the size of those. We don't have actual models of those, but the building to the north, which fronts on College Street, is something we do have a model of, and so that's in its proper scale and context because we have that model internally. So you see that the green portion I was talking about that has the common space on the second floor. On the third floor of this building is an open terrace that serves the residents of the addition. So everybody has access to that terrace, some outdoor space on the third floor, as well as some interior common space that can be used for individual activities, or somebody's having a birthday party or something like that. There's common space to be utilized, or there could be a tenant meeting or any number of things that could happen in that second floor space. So this is a view looking down Main, sort of northwest at more pedestrian eye level. So you see the existing Main Street shelter, and then looking towards the new addition at the rear and the main entrance to that new addition. Looking up the driveway with a slightly out of scale stone wall there on the left side of the existing Main Street building. You can see the trash enclosure at the rear and the 289 College Street building that is north of this property. The elevator tower, there was a question raised at DAB as to why we chose to slope the roof to the north rather than the south. And the reason for that is we didn't want to have to deal with rain or snow falling onto that terrace because that's the way you get to it, is from that little roofed portion that you see in the purple siding. So we didn't want to have roof dripping on that. And by sloping it to the north, it also can drain on the flat roof of the addition so that all the runoff can be handled from that. A view looking to the southwest, so you see Edmonds in the background, Consolidated Telephone to the right, the covered bike storage in the lower right-hand corner. And the first floor of the building will have a stair that exits out to this area so that folks who are able to use the stairs would be able, and who park at the north side parking lot, would be able to easily go in and outside the building there. It offers direct access to the outside for a picnic area, perhaps a grilling area, that sort of thing. And then easy access to the trash enclosure if folks want to use that stair. A view looking southeast. So you see in the foreground, the covered bike enclosure, the fence, and the Consolidated Telephone Company on the right, and the existing apartment building. I think it's actually condos on the left. So once again, changing materials. The lap siding is fiber cement, relates to the lap siding that's on the 1991 addition, and then some metal siding as we modulate the facade and the step backs that you'll see in particular on the south and on the west side. And then finally a view as you're walking up Main Street, looking in between the Consolidated Telephone Company and 278 Main Street. You get a better sense of how the materials work together between the 1991L of the existing building and the new addition. So that's a kind of a brief overview. I think we're here for sketch plan review and have been to DAB primarily to get feedback from you folks in terms of your thoughts about this. We recognize that we're proposing some additional height here because we're allowed to do that in this zone by having complied with inclusionary zoning. We're well under the 92% lot coverage that's allowed because of the inclusionary zoning. So, and one other thing that I'll mention, it's more evident actually on this rendering than, and it is evident also on the elevations. There are 3 apartments at what would be considered the basement level because this building sits a half level of its main floor is a half level above grade. There are 3 studio apartments at the lower level. So you can see in this rendering, the windows that are at that lower level. They're pretty good sized windows, but they are studio units that would be at that level, along with other common space uses like laundry and individual tenant storage, mechanical, electrical, that sort of thing.
I have one initial question for you. I suspect that most occupants here are not going to be driving cars, right? That's sort of the assumption. You don't need a lot of parking spaces for this building.
We don't need a lot of parking spaces, but it's not reasonable to assume that none will have cars. Some will have cars for sure, and there are some staff folks who work at the in the shelter, in the Main Street Family Shelter. So we're providing parking for those staff folks as well as for some of the folks that will have cars who live here.
Well, the question I have is, it seems a lot of people are going to be entering that entrance that you pointed out as a pedestrian from Main Street.
Yep.
And the walkway is not a particularly well laid out walkway. It's basically walking down the middle of the driveway, right?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Brad. It's something that we've talked about and thought about. And one of the considerations that we're doing, because we expect that the vehicular traffic will be relatively light, serving a total of 9 spaces, not a lot of, certainly not any high speed traffic. We're looking at the idea of incorporating and emphasizing pedestrian access by including a sidewalk built into the driveway itself, so that it actually accentuates the fact that we're encouraging pedestrian traffic there and trying to de-accentuate to diminish the idea of that being predominantly vehicular traffic.
It seems like something that would help.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's something we've talked about, and that's, as I said, one of the reasons we're here is to get feedback, and that's much appreciated.
Yeah. Are there parking spaces in that area now that are getting taken out?
There are not parking spaces in that area now.
Oh, okay.
The parking is all at the rear of the property.
So the amount of parking spaces stays about the same?
The total number of parking spaces is about the same. Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to open up to the other members of the board to see if they have questions at all on this, or want to make any comments on it.
Hey, this is Keenan. This project looks really great. I'm pretty excited about it. I was wondering, was there any thought put into, putting in more, like ramps and other ADA accessible locations other than it looked like it was just in the front, or I guess in that sort of middle back area, so that, if a resident doesn't have who is differently able, doesn't have just one location where they enter the building?
Well, it's really pretty complicated because of the, I would say probably about a 7-foot grade change from Main Street to get into the building. The current handicap accessibility is in roughly the same location, not exactly the same, but it's at the rear of the existing L where you access the wheelchair lift. So it's very similar location to what exists now. The main advantage, of course, is by designing it this way, we can offer a handicap accessibility to the second floor of the shelter, which it does not now have. It only has access to the first floor. So all the common spaces of the shelter and some of the rooms are accessible now, but now all of the rooms in the shelter will be accessible by locating this so that we can take advantage of the elevator that serves the new addition.
And somehow the control of who enters and where, who has access to where, that's sort of in the domain of really the people running the shelter.
Yeah, exactly. And as you can see here, and I'm sorry, I'm not understanding how to actually.
We can see your cursor.
Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So right here, this is a control point right here.
Yeah.
So if you live, and this control point exists on all floors. If you live in the new addition, the elevator serves people who come in, get to the main floor or the second floor, and can traverse to the shelter. This door, which will have key access and card access, excuse me, will allow residents who live in here to go through. It will be connected to the fire alarm so that it can serve as a second means of egress for the shelter in the event it's needed. But folks who live, there's a desire in the part of the client to actually have a separation between shelter and permanent housing here. So that point serves as that separation, and it occurs on every floor. So there is ability to interact. There's opportunity to access space on the second floor for folks in the shelter. But there actually is a control point here that separates the permanent housing from the shelter housing.
I guess I'll make one other comment, Bob, that I understand the conceptually the massing and how it's expressing different parts of the building. The articulation of some of the material seems a little schizophrenic at the moment, but given the history of all your buildings, I have total faith that you will get there to smooth it out and have it feel.
I appreciate that. As I said, it's a work in progress, but we're really more interested in conceptual and broader context questions for the sketch plan review. We did this same process when we developed 95 North Avenue for COTS. We went through sketch plan review, knowing that there was at that time some neighborhood opposition, and we thought it was good to get cards out on the table, become public with what the plans were, and get feedback. And we think the same thing is true here. There's no holding back of what anybody's trying to do. We do intend to go to an NPA meeting so that we can meet that next criterion in our path to a full zoning application. And we're getting civil engineering proposals this week so that we can select a civil engineer so we can become do a more detailed site plan analysis.
I will say it's nice to see that there's the picnic tables, there's some use of the site, which is an amenity that I think is important to have on most residential occupancies.
Yep.
Any other comments, feedback from the board on this? No. Well, I guess we'll wait for the actual development. Bob.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is the end of our agenda. Before closing, so are we okay deliberating on the things we have to deliberate tonight? I don't see anybody objecting to it, or nobody's cheering on one way or the other. But so we will close the public hearing and go into deliberative, where the public can.
The recording has stopped.
Was that our decision, Scott, that we stopped recording for the deliberative, but it's still being broadcasted tonight? Is that how it works?
Correct. The live stream continues. Recordings paused except for when you make a motion and vote.
Okay. Okay. So we have several things, and nobody was recused on anything tonight. How unusual. So 157, 159. I guess the documents are listed in a different order than the agenda. So I guess I should go by the agenda in terms of our deliberative here. So 77 Pine Street was the first item. I do feel that, we're between the city council and the planning commission, that the ordinance has been adopted a certain way, and that we can respond to it like that. See, do they meet the criteria for the extra height? But in basic terms, I think I feel like I'm bound to follow their guidance. So on this one, the real issue is the height. How are people feeling about the height issue on 79 Pine Street?
I think this is like what the code changes is designed for. It's 2 blocks away, or 2 lots away from what is currently the tallest building. So it seems totally within the keeping of that area and what the intention is for downtown development.
Yeah. I think that's also interesting. The renovation of what was Chittenden Bank, that's now the People's Bank, was that an administrative thing, or did I just fall asleep at that hearing?
Yes, it was administrative per the form code.
Yeah. So we didn't need to see that, but that's a fairly big renovation that's happening there that's going to transform the appearance of that building in some ways, right? Isn't it? So that the context, and I do feel they did a number of things to address the extra height on this, and it was helpful. It would have been more helpful to have the street elevation as part of the presentation, but hearing the heights of some of these things does get to put it in a context that it seems to be within the realm of what's happening there. So, any other
I'd like to make a motion.
This meeting is being recorded.
It's a new feature, now it tells us.
On 21-0927 CA 77 Pine Street, I move that we accept the staff recommendations and approve the what is the certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, any other, is there a second on this?
Second that.
Brooks. Okay, I'm basically in agreement with that. Is there any other discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? So it's unanimous. We have 3-6-6-0. Okay.
The recording has stopped.
I find it fascinating that the bathroom, I know, the bathroom is a public amenity that they have. That I'm just amazed at it. Either a terrace up on the roof or a bathroom. Anyways, that's the code. Okay. Next one, 157, 159 South Champlain Street. Again, this seems to be within the realm of what is asked for in the form-based code. I think they did a fairly thorough job on it. Any other comments, thoughts on this one? No. The only, I think the suggestion that maybe they consider landscaping and doing something to soften the west side of the building would be, I think, a suggestion we can make. I don't think it's a requirement that we can impose on them at this point. Is anybody interested in making a motion on this one?
I can make a motion.
This meeting is being recorded.
So on 21-0799 CA 157 to 159 South Champlain Street, I move that we approve the application and adopt staff findings with the suggestion that they incorporate some landscaping on the westernmost side.
A second on this one, Caitlin? Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, 6-0 on that one.
The recording has stopped.
Does that happen automatically, Scott, or do you have to push a button?
I'm serious. That's like a new feature. I've done nothing different. So I'm gonna have to dig through settings to see if I can.
I know there is a setting that you can have it not announce every time. You can just have it announced at the beginning.
Can you do it with a British accent?
Can it be like the navigation system and we pick out a man's voice with an Australian accent?
Yeah, that would be it. Okay, so now we have 125 South Cove Road, and it does seem that the
Any problems with that one?
Pardon? Brooks,
I think there's too many problems with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're willing to make the change on the lakeside, cut that back on the line. That's okay. But it does seem that I can believe that they just missed the thing on the garage until the end of the project. And I can see how it's sort of a pain in the ass, but it is the ordinance. So, and it seems to me it should be applying here just as much as on smaller lots where it's off.
It seems like they have plenty of room. It seems like the basement issue is not a non-issue with moving the.
No, it's just the current plan. That's really what it is. They'd have to rework some of the plan to push the garage back. So.
I think it does fit with the neighboring houses, though. You know, the garage is really closer to the house than almost any of the examples that they showed around them.
Closer to the, oh, I mean, it doesn't project as much.
Yeah. I think they're closer to what the current code is saying than anything around them.
And I guess that's the question, right? Is does the character of the neighborhood, the fact that the rest of the neighborhood predates the current code, and this is how they built, does that have a mitigation impact on this?
I don't think that changing the design though would require it to be out of character with the neighborhood. And I think that's the other, it can be within the ordinance and be within the character. So to me, Springer, that's why it's not overly convincing to me. If this was the only option for it to be within character, then I think it would be worth discussing further.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there, Caitlin. I mean, I understand their argument that there are two shall provisions that in that section H, you could read as being in conflict if you thought moving the garage back meant it wasn't in the character of the area. But it seems like they could meet both. I mean, the first one says the introduction of new buildings and additions shall maintain the existing development pattern and rhythm of structures along the existing streetscape. I don't think moving the garage back several feet to meet the other provision means it's no longer the existing development pattern or rhythm of the structures.
I always think that rhythm relates to the setback of the whole house to the street and maintaining that as a line across the street, which the garage here, if the garage moved back, the house could move forward. They'd have a little bit more room on the lakeside.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very nice design. I don't see like an independent reason to say it's got to be back further. It doesn't seem, that it's on its own is a problem, but I don't see it meeting that provision of the ordinance.
And I guess we're a somewhat literal board on most things. It does seem. So somebody want to make a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion.
This meeting is being recorded.
On 21-0910 CA 125 South Cove Road, that we deny the application
And was still
and adopt staff findings.
second? Keenan, and Keenan second. Any other discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? 5-1 on this. Okay.
The recording has stopped.
There'll be a lot of frantic redesign going on there. You like that, Mary?
Right after this, I'll get into the settings and find it.
Yeah, who invited her?
Okay. So Springer, how many more meetings do you have?
I think I have the next one, but looking at work schedules, I'm not yet sure if I'm going to be able to make it. So I'll let Scott know as soon as I know about that. But yeah, just to let the rest of the board know that I did not reapply for my position.
Well, you'll be sorely missed here, Springer.
I've really enjoyed it. I have. Being a new dad and Tanner turning 1, I'm starting to really value my evenings a lot differently than I used to.
Yes.
Understandable. Wait till they're older and then you want to come back so you have an excuse not to do it.
Okay, well.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you one
Yeah,
more
no,
time.
it's been a really awesome experience, and I've really enjoyed being on the board with everybody.
Appreciate it. Okay. Well, good night, all.
Good night.
Till next time.
Have a good one, guys.